I'm pleased to ask on stage Phoebe, Dinah, and David. If you want to join. Phoebe will be our moderator, and so she's Senior Customer Success at Botify. And we have David and Dinah. David is the head of SEO at Trainline. He's an SEO expert with more than 8 years of experience. He has been entrusted with the role of a judge of a prestigious event such as UK Search Award in 2023 and 22 too. Congratulations for this. And for Dinah, she's senior analyst at Premier Inn with over 8 years of SEO expertise. So we have a lot of expertise on stage across different industries. She's passionate about creating content-focused strategies underpinned with solid technical foundation, which is the base to create good content, by the way. I leave it with you, Phoebe. Let's start.
Absolutely. Thanks, Benoit. And good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all had a really delicious lunch. So as we all know, it's been a pretty turbulent time in the travel industry over the last few years. So I'm delighted to be here today with Dave and Dinah, where we're going to be talking through our next session, Navigating Disrupted Terrain, Effective Strategies for Success in the Travel and Hospitality Sectors. So without further ado, let's kick us off with the first discussion point. So in light of the recent disruptions faced by the travel industry in recent years, how do you recommend travel businesses adapt their benchmarking and trend analysis strategies to remain competitive? And Dinah, let's kick us off with you for this question.
Yeah, we've faced a lot of trouble in the industry. Is that coming out okay? I can hear a lot of echo. Okay, cool. Yeah, we faced a lot of disruption in the travel industry over the last few years. So not only the pandemic, but more recently, all the train strikes affecting a lot of our particularly business travel. So one of the ways we've kind of trying to be actually a little bit more strategic is just measuring a bit differently. So rather than necessarily looking at it being back year on year, we're just trying to map our trends. So we saw last year a lot of demand spikes around the Queen's Jubilee and then subsequently her funeral as well, which obviously we haven't seen this year. So we can almost look like things are stepping back, but potentially actually it's just a way of looking and kind of benchmarking a bit differently and making sure you've got that added context from the previous year. And even looking back to pre-COVID, just to kind of map where we are in terms of performance. We saw a lot of brand interest, and we had very much a captured market during the pandemic with nobody really traveling internationally. So obviously the rise in international travel has kind of stepped our demand back a little bit at the moment. So yeah, we've been trying to just kind of capture that a little bit in terms of how we're benchmarking. And then we're using kind of our kind of upper level content, so travel guides and digital PR, to actually acquire new traffic and new audiences and make sure that we're kind of promoting the UK almost like a bit of a middle tourism management kind of service, and just highlighting the UK as like a really top destination as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of year-on-year data and accurately mapping kind of different events to previous years is so vital. And I think it's been mentioned before today. And I know, Dave, that was something you were going to kind of mention as well. I guess over to you. How are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what's been tricky for us is, travel patterns change so much. So pre-COVID, we had a certain level of demand. And then, post-COVID, or as we start to come out of COVID, that completely changed. So all of our forecasting is based on kind of the previous year, but it made it really difficult to forecast. So it was my job to make sure that basically when we're communicating to the C-suite, that they're understanding that demand is changing and kind of shifting it over time. And it depends on the market as well. So take the US as an example. We expected demand to be a certain way this year based on what we saw last year. But last year we saw a big peak in demand in June when the borders opened up and they all came over. And we didn't see it this year. We saw kind of an increase in demand right from the start of the year. So it's been quite tricky for us to kind of benchmark and then understand where we're going to be next year based on demand.
Yeah, hopefully we don't have those spikes of borders opening and closing again for a few years, but I can understand it's incredibly hard to benchmark against, and I know that, you know, from experience in dealing with lots of our clients here, that it's been really tricky for everyone trying to look back at the COVID data and effectively benchmark against that, and I guess that's why it's so vital to have that kind of long-term data, and for those who are able to benchmark against pre-pandemic levels, that's been really vital. Cool. Moving through to our next question in terms of post-pandemic events. So these have kind of significantly altered travel trends and consumer behaviour. So I guess my question here is, can you share any specific examples of how these changes have impacted the industry and I guess your businesses, and how you've responded effectively, or how you would suggest kind of going about that?
Yeah, shall I go?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the big things, as I mentioned before as well, was the strikes, which obviously affects you as well. But we've had to kind of adapt how we're viewing our data. So we've seen that a lot of people obviously affected by strikes are having to kind of cancel and amend. So we've seen an increase in people selecting a different type of rate product on our website as well. So making sure that we're kind of optimizing and merchandising how we visually present that on the website, and just making sure people are aware of that level of flexibility when there is still that strain and pressure going on in the market. Excuse me. So yeah, we've been doing that. And then another thing that we've noticed as well in terms of a trend is that there's a bit more of like a business leisure blend going on. So I guess you could call that bleisure, if you wanted to have a tacky word for it. But yeah, a lot of our midweek customers that are typically business travelers are actually kind of shifting their travel dates towards the weekend. So if there's a strike at the early part of the week, we're noticing actually it's not necessarily an outright cancellation. It's actually just that they're shifting and actually adding on potential weekend dates to their stay as well. So kind of actually, you know, blurring the line between who we're talking to as a customer.
Bleisure's not a term I'd heard before we started talking about this, but definitely one I'm going to kind of carry forward. Yeah. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I definitely think, you know, if I was ever kind of travelling with work, I would look to kind of, you know, merge the two. So it's definitely interesting to hear that that's something you guys are focusing on. And you talk about strikes. I mean, could they be more topical for you, Dave, at Trainline?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, we all hold you fully
Last
accountable.
week was
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Everything that's
And
going
please
on.
no strikes questions in the Q&A. Yeah, obviously it's been a big one for us. But actually more important for us has been what's happening on the SERP. So we've seen some real disruption. And what we've really needed to do is not only look at our SEO ranks, but look at our ranks in terms of all the different products in Google. So last year, Google introduced Google Trains, which is basically their own train products, and that's kind of scaled out over time. It's above us now in the search results a lot of the time. So it's been a massive disruptor for us, and basically, actually looking at Botify, we saw our click-through rates erode, even if we were in the same position, you know, SEO-wise. So it's been something we've had to navigate massively, really.
Yeah, I know we were chatting about that before, and it's really interesting to see that. I guess, is that something similar that Google's doing for you there, Dinah, in terms of kind of booking?
Definitely. I mean, we saw it during the pandemic and we still see it now, is that actually people are looking for a lot of information at these times when things are quite uncertain. So we've noticed that people are kind of, you know, there's a lot more featured snippet answers coming up in our search results. So we're seeing a rise in impressions, but potentially a step back in clicks and click-through rate. I think, again, that's just because we are there providing that information to the users. But yeah, they're definitely searching for that kind of query and looking to find out information, which obviously then impacts, you know, people converting and traffic going to the website directly itself when there are these kind of disruptive events going on.
I guess, like, would you call the really bizarre weather seasons that have gone up on this year as disruptive events as well, like hot Octobers? And
we've seen that obviously weather actually is like a big impact on us. So when the weather is quite nice, like it was early part of this weekend and this week, we see a big sort of demand spike, particularly to like our coastal destinations and leisure kind of adventure type categories. But obviously when it's not been so nice over the summer, we've had like a much slower kind of summer in terms of our leisure bookings, just because people are kind of waiting for that heat wave to come before they book, which presents in itself another challenge, because when the heat wave comes, the demand comes, which is great, but then you sell out and then you're like, okay, where do we put all this traffic and how are we going to redirect people to other destinations? So whether it be the countryside near national parks or something along those lines if the coastals are all full. You know, I think we saw on the bank holiday weekend just how packed Brighton Beach was. So yeah, no point driving lots of traffic to those pages at that point.
That's really interesting. I think we're seeing the same thing. So as I was talking about demand a minute ago, we're seeing just changing weather, meaning that we're having different peaks in demand than we did previously. I feel like before the pandemic, everything was fairly normal, whereas now it's kind of changing all the time. And even this morning we were talking with the C-suite about how demand has impacted Italian travel and rail travel in the last few weeks, which we just didn't see this time last year or the year before. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, hopefully it will continue next year, but we'll see. Cool, so onto our third question. You've both had successes responding to changes through the optimization of organic search to maintain profitability. Could you elaborate for us on the innovative approaches or technologies that are helping you and potentially other travel companies to gain a competitive edge, I guess, especially obviously in the context of SEO and search visibility? And Dave, you can perhaps kick us off with this one.
So I think, and this goes not just for travel, but any industry, technical SEO is the foundation. So a lot of the work we've done over the last 4 or 5 years has been making sure that we're getting that in place. So making sure that the pages that are on the website are valuable and anything that isn't, kind of getting rid of it. So there's a project we did a couple of years ago. I spoke about that before. And then it's also making sure that you're linking properly within the website. So recently we made a change, and most of our website now is within depths 1 to 5, which has been a really good change, and just really helps to boost the value of all of those the pages on the website. So I guess once tech's in place, then it's content. So we've done a lot of work around programmatic SEO. I think Fred touched on product-led SEO as well. That's kind of the way we've approached it. What we're trying to do is utilize our data and kind of input it into our content. So Greta actually spoke about this in Brighton a few months ago, but basically scaling out pieces of content on our kind of route pages and then injecting, data that we've basically got internally that kind of adds that value to those pieces of content. So I think those have kind of been some of the key things. And more recently, we've been looking at EAT. So trip reviews, making sure that we're writing with first-hand experience. We've got 1,000 Trainliners, and one thing we've recently done is trying to kind of reach out to people internally and get them to send us information on specific trips they've taken as well, and also making sure that we have the kind of the visual evidence through videos or imagery, which has been powerful. And then I think the final piece for us has been just making sure that we're targeting conversion rate. So as I said, Google Trains is kind of eating into our traffic. So what we need to make sure we're doing is actually improving our landing page conversion so that we're basically getting more out of our pages.
Yeah, interesting. I remember watching Greta's talk, and that was super interesting. When we were chatting about this before, you also mentioned split testing as well, something that you were looking into. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something we've been we started, I think, November last year, and we've kind of been scaling it up. And I won't go into too much detail because Elise is actually going to be doing a talk on this in the next couple of months. But basically, we have kind of 2 sets of pages that are two groups of pages that are all very similar. So for us, it's the route pages. They all have roughly the same amount of demand and clicks, so that we can kind of compare them, and then we make one change on one, and then nothing on the other, control. And most of the tests we've been doing is kind of metadata. So improving we're trying to basically improve our click-through rate on the SERP itself. So we usually run them for 2-3 weeks, get a read, and then the powerful thing about the way we've kind of built our site is we can then scale those changes to the 4 million pages that we have kind of in one click. So it means that if we see a conversion rate increase from the metadata that we're doing, then we can basically scale it out. And that's kind of when I'm communicating to the C-suite, I'm saying we've made this change, but actually once it's scaled out and we annualize it over the year, we're talking about many thousands of new customers, for example.
I'm excited to hear that talk in the next couple of months.
It's going to be good.
So
it's going to be good.
Looking forward to that. Dinah, how are you guys looking at that? Is anything there resonating, or is it
Yeah, definitely resonating and definitely inspiring. I think we're not quite at that stage. We're actually doing a bit like Adrian said earlier, is actually going back to the fundamentals. So a lot of our basics on the website haven't been quite right for a while. You know, Phoebe, you obviously know, Isabel knows as well. We've got like 3 H1s persisting on all our pages. We're just not in a good place in terms of the basics. So I think we're literally going back to the foundations of what we're doing. So entire kind of content rewrite happening. We're also in the middle of a back-end kind of hotel booking system migration. So once that's done, we'll have a lot more kind of to play with as well. So at the moment, we've kind of got a hotel booking system that partially acts as a CMS as well. So we're really struggling with that. So once that's kind of done and dusted, we'll have a lot more kind of flexibility in terms of how we can push new content and test a lot more. But yeah, as I say, we're going back to basics, and we've recently got a bulk uploader to our website. So while it's not that innovative, it's going to help us scale a lot. And I think that's where we'll be actually coming to sneak a peek at your website and have more chats with you to kind of get additional inspirational content, and you know, being able to test things like metadata at scale, you know, across a number of pages, will actually help us a lot, I think, in the long run. So yeah, looking forward to doing that, and maybe adding some weather emojis when the heat wave comes to enhance some click-through rate or something.
Nice. Yeah, we've been testing different emojis on the SERP as well.
How's it going?
I think some work, some don't. It depends on the market.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Yeah.
I've never personally searched with an emoji, but maybe I will. Fab. Well, let's move on to our final question of the session. Search engine algorithms and AI are transforming the SEO landscape. So what are some of the key algorithm changes or AI-driven trends that you've observed, and how should businesses adapt their SEO practices accordingly? And Dave, we'll start with you again.
Sure. So I think there's 2 key things to me, I guess more specifically talking for Trainline. So the reviews update, I think it was in 2020, April of this year, Google basically said that in order to kind of evidence, you need to basically provide evidence of what you're doing, so through images or videos. And I think that's kind of transformed the way we think about first-hand content. I think before it was enough to just have the content, but now you basically need to make sure you've got that evidence. So I think that's been a really key point. And I think actually it was kind of hidden a little bit. I think it wasn't until about June that we really picked that one up. So I think it's, one, important to always stay on top of it, but 2, that element. And then the second one is obviously SGE. So we set up a VPN in, I think, June, just after it was released in the US. And we've been testing it for about 3 months. And it's quite interesting because we know that the content from the web is powering SGE. And so, our theory was, well, if we've got a lot of content, then we should be appearing, in SGE as much as we can. So that's kind of what we've been testing.
Yeah, the SGE stuff is really interesting. I know we were chatting about that before and having a look at it. Are there any key findings from that so far that you'd be able to?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, what's interesting is there's lots of industry commentary on this. And what we've been seeing isn't necessarily completely aligning to that. So I think there's a stat that only 13% of the websites that are in the organic 1 to 10 are actually in SGE as well, completely. But what we've seen is we are often in SGE. And I think the key reason for that is because you need the content to power it. So when you do a search in SGE, it will show a citation. And then when you click the citation, it will take you to that content that was on the page. So obviously, if you don't have the content, then you're not gonna rank. But I think that the key finding is it's mostly informational search. So a lot of the value that brings a lot of the traffic to the website is through transactional keywords for us. So like London to Paris train, for example. We don't see SGE show up for that. It's just a normal SERP. But what we do see it showing up for is like how to get to London, how to get to Paris by train, or something like that. So for us, there's a less of a traffic kind of risk there, but it's also an opportunity because we do kind of have a wealth of content. So it's just a case of trying to identify where those valuable pieces of content are and going after them. But yeah, I mean, and the other thing is it just changes so much. So, as a team, we're constantly checking every week what's happening. We'll look at our brand SERP, and one day it will be one thing, one day it will be another thing, one day we'll be in there, one day we may not be in there. So it's just understanding how it's evolving. And I think that the SGE system is potentially a different ranking system or different system to the organic SERP, and that's why there's kind of a discrepancy. But generally we've seen it's been fairly positive for us so far, but I'd be very surprised if it gets released anytime soon, because the quality is often being pretty questionable, and I just feel like it's quite a big risk. And then even just yesterday, we noticed Google have kind of introduced SGE Lite, which I think Glenn Gabe kind of named as that. And now when you search for something, you often have to click to generate the result. And then you have kind of a small little snippet summary, and then you've got to click that to see the whole snippet. So it's almost 2 clicks just to get SGE. So again, it feels like Google was maybe saying it's not actually, being interacted with that well. I think in September they said that it was, but I don't know. I wonder if it's not actually so good for them as it is right now.
I think Google sometimes say a lot of things, don't they? And
Exactly.
then it turns out we all follow their practices, and then it bites us in the bum. So one of the things we're doing at the moment is just, as I say, tightening our focus on customer experience. So adding in a lot of that content that we haven't previously had, making sure that we've got good, valuable, useful content for our user. And rather than thinking like SEO or AI or any of those things, we're just thinking actually what would somebody need to know if they land on this page? So adding in things like simple stuff that we just, as I say, we haven't had. So FAQs, a little bit more expanded content, redesigning actually the layout and the structure of our page so it makes it a bit easier to navigate. And then one of the big changes we've recently done over the past couple of weeks, again, previously very limiting sort of CMS and capabilities on the website, we have managed to add in links to our destinations on our navigation. So would you believe it, we just talked a lot about our brand and our lovely rooms and our lovely breakfast, but we didn't link to any of our destinations in our navigation or our homepage, except for at the footer, which isn't also working very well. But now we finally managed to add that in, so we're going to be testing and tracking that to see how that performs for us. But yeah, we've definitely seen a few other industry examples when we've been doing our research in terms of what our strategy is going to be. And a brand called CV Villas did effectively a massive CMS migration, rewriting content, digital PR, building, the basics and the foundations. And they did see an uplift of 25% in traffic, 17% on conversions year on year. And I think it was about 15% revenue uplift year on year just by kind of getting those fundamentals locked down and sorted out. So I think hopefully if we follow that track, we'll be in good stead.
Absolutely. Well, fab. I think that brings us to the end of our chat today. So thank you both so much for joining us. That was super interesting.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Ben was
Thanks.
going to take over.